What happens when a lawful good paladin becomes the worst kind of player at your D&D table? Today we're diving into one of the most infamous Reddit horror stories ever posted. A tale of stupidity, stubbornness, and how one player's need to be the hero caused the first TPK a dungeon master ever experienced, the only mutiny he's ever faced, and proof that some people absolutely refuse to learn from their mistakes. Welcome to D&D Reddit Horror Stories. This is the Tormund Saga. Our story comes from a new dungeon master who was just trying his best. He'd played in a group before, and when their regular DM burned out, he stepped up to run 4th edition D&D. Yeah, I know, 4th edition, but it was the newest at the time and everyone had the books. This DM was excited. He still had a lot to learn about being a DM, but he was enjoying the process. He had his story planned out, his villain ready, and a starting town all worked out. He was looking forward to learning the craft and helping his friends have a good time. What he got instead was a masterclass in how one problem player can derail everything. The cast of this disaster was small but memorable. Let me introduce you to the players who would soon experience one of the most frustrating campaigns ever recorded. First, we have Jim playing Flynn, an elf ranger. Jim was the most experienced player at the table, having been the previous DM himself. He was laid back, helpful with the rules, and had more knowledge of the system than everyone else put together. Flynn was equally chill, the kind of character who could adapt to any situation and just enjoy the ride, no matter how apocalyptic things got. Then there's Amy, Jim's girlfriend, playing Sarah, a half-orc rogue. Now here's the thing about Sarah, she was built nothing like a typical rogue. Amy had dumped all her points into strength and charisma, giving her only a +2 to move silently. Sarah's idea of stealth, walk up to someone and smash them in the head with her mace. She was basically a bodyguard or gang enforcer pretending to be a rogue. Why she didn't just play a fighter nobody knows. Not even the DM. Katie was there too, playing Nyx, a gnome wizard. Katie was the quiet punk type who seemed a little too cool for the rest of the nerdy group. This was her first time playing D&D, and as you'll see, her presence would be far less important than her absence. Remember that, it matters later. And finally, the star of our horror show, Morris. Morris was a large, loud, flamboyant man who had a seemingly clinical need to be the center of attention, both in character and at the table. Picture Titus Burgess with a beard and you've got the idea. Now, Morris wasn't necessarily a bad role player. In fact, he put way more effort into it than anyone else at the table. The problem was what he was role-playing. Morris was playing Tormund, a lawful good dragonborn paladin. And when I say he played a lawful good paladin, I mean he played every terrible stereotype you're thinking of right now when you hear those words. Tormund would march right into bandit camps proclaiming everyone under arrest with no plan or strategy. The rest of the party better scramble to back him up, because there was simply no stopping him once he saw injustice. He'd actively shake down local law enforcement if he felt they weren't doing their job properly. He'd refuse to negotiate with anyone he considered a criminal of any sort. No, they had to immediately submit to his divine authority, or he'd draw his longsword. And yes, every single time this led to confrontations, collateral damage and needless deaths. But hey, Tormund was simply doing Bahamut's will, right? He was just playing in character. In short, Morris played Tormund like a lawful stupid asshole. Keep this in mind, because it's about to get so much worse. The setup was painfully standard. 4 adventuring strangers meet in a town besieged by problems. They even met in a tavern, something the DM still cringes about. The town was in farming country that had been experiencing increased orc raids, and the local guard couldn't figure out why. Behind the scenes, there was an orc warboss who had beaten all the other clans into submission, becoming the biggest and the baddest. He was meant to be the big bad for the opening act, a boss the party would work up to fighting after gaining some levels and learning to work together as a team. The DM started them at level 3. Level 1 felt too weak, but he still wanted orcs to be a decent threat, especially in large numbers. The plan was that by the time they reached this warboss, they'd be several levels higher. You know, like how these games typically work. Most of the first session was role-playing and town exploration. There was an encounter with some bandits outside town, where Tormund demonstrated his approach to stealth by charging into their camp with all the subtlety of the Kool-Aid man in plate mail, smacking an artillery shell with a sledgehammer. This encounter did not bring them above level 3, and yes, I mention that detail because it's very important. Session 2 was where the real plot kicked in. The local law enforcement came to the PCS asking for their help. Reports were coming in of a massive warband of orcs approaching, burning everything in their path. Farms were being attacked, crops and homes were being destroyed, and people were being butchered with their bodies displayed on poles as grim trophies. The captain of the guard explained that they were preparing the town's defenses for the attack. They needed heroes to help coordinate the defense and boost morale. The DM had planned an entire scenario in his mind. A fairly massive fight across several fronts, with each PC in charge of a section of the town, along with a contingent of guardsmen. Hordes of orcs crashing and smashing, with men and wizards and rangers fighting back against the green tide. Something out of Warhammer. And hopefully it was going to be sweet. But the DM didn't understand how fully committed Tormund was to his own brand of justice. This wasn't just a warpath. This was a crusade that went beyond normal lawful good compulsions. Tormund was going to smite everyone and everything connected to this atrocity, and he didn't care if he had to do it with his bare hands. It took the DM literally throwing NPCs in Tormund's path to slow him down from stomping toward the smoke in the distance. The captain of the guard begged the party to stay and help with the defenses. He told them there was an effort to bring all the outlying farmers into town to keep them safe. He said they needed heroes to help raise the fighting spirits of the local guards, that seeing adventurers fighting next to them might just be the spark they needed to prevail. Tormund vehemently refused. They didn't need to worry about a thing because, as he put it, "We've got this." With those 3 words, Tormund walked down the dirt road toward the rising smoke. The town guard called after him, pleading for him to return. Many, including the captain, offered to go with him to help. The DM figured more bodies might at least give them a shot at survival. He didn't care that it made no narrative sense, he just wanted them to have a chance. But Tormund refused the help too. He ordered everyone who volunteered to go back to town, supposedly to keep them safe because, lawful good I guess, never mind that this was their job and they'd volunteered for these positions. Since when did Tormund care about collateral damage as long as it was in the pursuit of justice? The rest of the party followed because they knew never to split the party. This was Nyx's first session. She didn't really understand how D&D worked yet, so the DM wasn't expecting her to be the voice of reason. As they walked down the road, the DM described the rising plumes of smoke in the distance, dark and angry, rising slowly as if laden with the bodies of the dead and burned. Flynn took the initiative to climb a nearby hill and scout with his elven eyes. It was daylight on rolling plains, so the DM didn't even make him roll. He saw the orcs marching steadily down the road in a fat, black column just a few miles away. There were at least 50 of them. This, the DM reasoned, had to knock some sense into the PCS. Flynn ran back to the group. "Hey guys," he said, "there's a lot of them coming, like 50 a lot." Tormund nodded as if deep in thought. "Good," he said after a pause. "That means we'll have a decent fight." And he continued marching down the road. The DM had to say something. He broke character. This is something most DMs hate doing, but sometimes it's necessary. "Guys," he said, "I'm talking to you as me right now, not as the DM as me. Real talk, what you are doing is a bad idea. Like a really bad idea." Essara asked what they should do instead. The DM reminded them that the captain had pleaded with them multiple times to help with the city defenses. There were ways to handle this that didn't involve suicide. "That's true," said Flynn with a smirk. He seemed to be agreeing, though he didn't seem too passionate about defending his position either way. Then Tormund stared daggers at the DM and opened his mouth. "I will not allow them to live." The DM literally threw up his hands. "Dude, there's like 50 of them." Then Tormund said what the DM would later call the second most insulting thing from this entire experience. "Don't worry, we'll be fine. Oh, and by the way, in case you need reminding, they are all level, freaking 3. Now let's be clear about something. This DM was not out to destroy his players. He wanted them to win. Otherwise, what's the point? But he also wasn't going to hand them victory on a silver platter. If players make stupid decisions, they need to face the consequences. The DM's job is to tell a story, and sometimes in that story, PC stupidity threatens to burn everything down. When that happens, sometimes you have to speak up. And this DM did speak up. Multiple times. He was ignored every single time. But this was more than just bad decision-making. This was disrespect. Tormund had called down the thunder by dismissing every warning, every piece of advice, every attempt to help. As the DM put it, he was going to get a little lightning. After that session, the DM was angry. But after cooling off, he spent the week designing a challenging but fair encounter. A tough ambush that might humble Tormund without outright slaughtering the party. He couldn't put them against the actual 50 orcs that would be instant death, but he could make them sweat. He arrived at the next session ready to roll, but immediately noticed something wrong. Katie wasn't there. "Where's Katie?" he asked. "Oh, she couldn't make it tonight," Jim said. "Looks like you'll have to run Nix." "I don't have her sheet." "Well, I guess we'll just have to go on without her." The DM was stuck. He didn't want to postpone when everyone else was there, but he'd balanced the encounter for a full party. He'd never adjusted a fight on the fly before, and he didn't know wizards well enough to run Nix properly. They decided Nix had blue thumb disease that day. Not a good start. The DM leveled with them one more time. "Guys, I'm not going to lie to you. This fight could get really bad. And you're going in a man down, you have no spellcaster among you, no area control. Are you sure you want to continue forward down the road?" I think you can guess what Tormund said. The party came across a series of rocky outcroppings rising on either side of the road, forming a little valley. Sitting right in the middle of the road was a strange sight, a single wooden barrel, and peeking out from behind that barrel was a very nervous goblin holding a torch. If you played Warcraft back in the day, you know exactly where this is going. The party saw this obvious setup and paused to think. Flynn said, "Well, this is clearly a trap." They nodded, and for the briefest moment, the DM could see creative gears turning in their heads. Perhaps they might come up with a way around it. I draw my sword and walk right up to him, demanding that he stand down and reveal the location of the rest of his foul kindred. Tormund boldly declared, placing his miniature right in front of the goblin. Let nobody say the DM didn't give them a chance. Shaking his head with an exasperated sigh, the DM moved Tormund's miniature 10 feet back from the barrel. "You get to about here," he said tiredly, loudly proclaiming your challenge, when the goblin lets out a terrified yelp and jams the torch into the top of the barrel. This ignites the gunpowder inside, causing a large explosion which liquefies him and sends you flying backwards 10 feet. You are now prone and you take 13 points of damage. Everybody roll initiative. From the other side of the newly formed crater came a modest group, about 3 orcs, 4 goblins, and a goblin shaman. Not nearly as many enemies as it could have been. But it was the shaman the DM had tricks planned for. Flynn won initiative and hopped onto one of the rocky outcroppings. He took a shot, but then came the shaman's turn. He cast blindness on Flynn, the only ranged fighter, and nailed him. Flynn failed his save. This began the only aspect of the encounter that was completely down to bad luck, instead of bad tactics. Meanwhile, Isabella charged into the crater swinging her mace at an orc, while Tormund crawled up off his back and joined the fight. The first round went to them as they did some moderate damage. Then the second round began. Flynn failed his save against blindness again, leaving him exposed, useless, and defenseless. The goblins swarmed him like a pack of hungry dogs. And then the shaman went again. This time he cast his second spell, a cloud of magical darkness. He dropped it right in the center of the crater, expanding it to cover the entire section of road where Isabella and Tormund were fighting. This wasn't ordinary darkness. It was magical darkness that only affected the PCS. The enemies could still see perfectly fine. The entire party was now blind. Now any player worth a damn would state the obvious. We need to get out of there, otherwise we're just blindly swinging at nothing. Maybe some more aggressive players might give it a few rounds, hoping for that natural 20, but most would conclude that a tactical retreat was necessary. They stayed in that cloud of darkness, flailing at nothing while getting smacked in the head by orcs, until they hit 0 hit points. It was the most baffling thing the DM had ever seen. They hit nothing. Factoring in the darkness modifier, the orcs' armor class, and their measly level 3 attack bonuses, probably nothing outside of a natural 20 could have connected, but they just kept swinging like they were trying out for the Mets. Even when Tormund and Isabella were both under half health, they just kept going. Poor Flynn was the first to go down, hacked to bits by laughing goblins who stabbed the blind, flailing elf. At least he had an excuse. He had a spell in his eyes. But Tormund and Isabella, the DM reminded them multiple times that the only reason they couldn't see was because of this magical cloud. All they would have to do is leave it, and they'd be fine. But apparently, leaving the cloud was not an option. Apparently, retreating was against Tormund's personal code of ethics or some other stupid reason. He stayed in that cloud like it owed him money. The DM shook his head. "Dude," he said, "just leave the magical cloud. You're fighting shadows here, you're getting killed." Morris simply curled his lip and said, "No, this is personal now. Why do you need to beat them in a magical cloud of darkness?" "I don't retreat." There was silence at the table. The DM looked at Morris, then back at the map, then back at Morris and nodded. "All right then," he said. "Here they come again. Hope not seeing it coming makes it hurt less." And before the end of the next round, the entire party was down. It was the DMU's first TPK. The table was silent. Morris stared at the map like he was trying to drill holes in it with his eyes. Amy seemed confused that her hit points were at 0. It might have been the first time that had happened to her. Jim leaned back with a smirk, shaking his head and chuckling. He knew what had just happened was beyond stupid, but he was taking it in stride. Eventually, Morris looked at the DM and said, "That was way too hard of an encounter. That was unfair. We should never have gone up against something like that. That was a terrible fight." And that's when the DM got mad. For those keeping track, that was the most insulting thing Morris said during this whole experience. All the frustration from the past few weeks came bubbling up. "Dude," the DM yelled. "I took it easy on you, are you kidding me? I gave you every opportunity to not do what you did. I flat out told you it was a bad idea, but you did it anyway, you didn't listen." The DM wasn't done. "You think what you got was bad? You didn't come anywhere close to the actual orc force. You were so underleveled for what you were trying, and I tried telling you that. And you fought stupidly. You could have left that cloud at any time, but you didn't. I gave you so many opportunities to fix this, but every single time you refused because you play Tormund like he's a pig-headed asshole. So how, Morris? How is this all my fault?" Jim nodded with a smirk. "It's true, you did warn us many times." Morris looked at his character sheet and grumbled. "Well, I guess I'll just roll up a new freaking character." "Oh no," the DM told him. He was still angry, but he had a plan brewing. "You don't have to do that, you're not dead." "What do you mean, I'm at 0? Just because you're at 0 doesn't mean you're dead. You've been captured. Tormund is still alive, so is Flynn and Sarah. Trust me, I can save this, it'll be fine." This is when Morris had a look of absolute anger come over his face. He scowled and said through gritted teeth, "I would rather you kill me than be captured." The DM rolled his eyes. He was so beyond done with this guy. "Fine then, roll up a new character if you want. Just remember I didn't make you do it." The session ended. The DM went home to salvage this disaster. The DM spent the next week coming up with a plan he actually really liked. The orcs would capture the unconscious party and take them back to their main camp, which would be lightly guarded since most of the warriors were out raiding the town. This was a perfect opportunity for Nyx, the gnome wizard who'd missed the disastrous session. Katie could use Nyx's spells to rescue the others in a creative way, giving her a cool introduction to D&D, making her feel important, and connecting her character to the group. And maybe, just maybe, Tormund might learn some humility from it. His stubborn ways had led to the town being less defended than it should have been. There could be real consequences and real character growth. Character development, what a concept. Despite the disastrous sessions, the DM was looking forward to getting the campaign on an interesting path. He drew up a handmade map of the orc encampment. He arrived at the next session, ready and excited to begin. What he found instead was betrayal. When the DM arrived, he was told that the group had made a decision. They had all decided he was no longer going to run the campaign. Jim would take over as DM and they would start a new game. The DM was welcome to roll up a character and play with them, but he would no longer be behind the screen. There had been no warning, no discussion, no chance to defend himself or explain his side. Just, "We've decided you're out." The DM's feelings were deeply hurt by this, and honestly, they still were years later when he posted this story. All the time and work he'd put into the game apparently meant nothing to them. It's not surprising that he very quickly fell out of touch with all of them, as they clearly weren't exactly what he'd call great friends. He still didn't know exactly why they felt he'd been unfair, but he figured it was mostly down to a serious lack of self-awareness, combined with a terrible misunderstanding of how to play a lawful good paladin. Here's where the story takes its most ironic turn. Despite being hurt by the mutiny, the DM rolled up a character, one who ended up becoming one of his all-time favorites, and he continued playing with them. They played the same campaign setting, with the same characters, so Morris was once again playing Tormund the Dragonborn Paladin. And no, he had not learned a goddamn thing. Tormund continued his lawful stupid antics under the new DM, proving once and for all that the problem was never the original DM's style. It was Morris. It was always Morris. So what do we take away from the Tormund Saga? For players, just playing my character is never an excuse for disruptive behavior. Your character choices affect the entire table. Tormund wasn't lawful good, he was lawful selfish. True lawful good characters protect others, work within systems when possible, and make tactical decisions for the greater good. They don't charge blindly into certain death because of pride. For DMS, sometimes players will blame you no matter what you do. This DM gave multiple warnings, provided obvious escape routes, and crafted a brilliant recovery scenario. None of it mattered to Morris, who was determined to see himself as the victim. And for groups, this is what happens when you enable problem players instead of addressing them. Instead of confronting Morris about his disruptive behavior, this group scapegoated the DM. The person trying to maintain boundaries and consequences became the bad guy, while the actual problem was protected. The mutiny didn't solve anything. It just enabled the problem to continue. Morris got exactly what he wanted, a DM who wouldn't challenge his behavior and continued being just as disruptive as ever. Don't be Tormund, don't enable Tormunds, and definitely don't stage mutinies instead of having honest conversations.